to the Agent Survival Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Ruppel, and we are back with another Friday 5 episode, recapping the events of the last week that you should know about. We will start out with number 5, a little bit of news that I have been looking forward to for quite some time. This week, Starbucks released their spring menu on Tuesday, and we saw the return of the iced lavender latte alongside 2 other old favorites and 2 new offerings. Also back for spring, the iced lavender cream oat milk matcha and the lavender cream frappuccino. New to the menu, an iced cherry chai and a jalapeno chicken pocket. Of course, the new beverages also bring 2 new cold foams while they last. They are limited edition. The lavender cream and cherry cream cold foams. Not to be outdone, Dunkin debuted their spring menu on Wednesday, bringing back the iconic Dunkin latte and pistachio coffee drinks. Both of those are available hot or iced. And then on the food front, ham and cheese pretzel sliders, a chicken bacon croissant stuffer, sweet black pepper snackin' bacon, blueberry sprinkled munchkins, and a cotton candy specialty donut. Out of everything on that list, I think the Dunkin latte sounds like the most interesting item. It was apparently inspired by coffee milk, which originated in Rhode Island. But the dairies around here in central Pennsylvania love making it, and to be fair, it's really good. Dunkin makes it with a combination of espresso, whole milk, and coffee extract. I am not sure how much caffeine it has in it, but when we make coffee milk around here, I don't think it has espresso. So I would advise checking the caffeine content before you order it. Moving on to number 4. Last week, Alexa got her very own generative AI-powered glow-up to rival Siri and other AI-powered assistants. According to Amazon, quote, she's smarter, more conversational, more capable, and free with Prime, end quote. So yes, another free service you gain access to if you're paying for Amazon Prime. Otherwise, you'll be paying $20 a month. Quick note, Amazon Prime membership is currently $14.99 per month, and it comes with a bunch of other perks than just free shipping from Amazon. So it's a little bit of a better deal to go with the bundled Amazon Prime membership. Alexa Plus essentially turns your Alexa device into your own personal assistant. You can have more natural conversations without having to shout at your speakers with every new sentence. Alexa Plus can access and personalize your news for you, remember and recall details, provide notifications, manage your calendar, create and send text messages and emails, find podcast episodes, manage smart devices around your home, order groceries, take out, catch an Uber, and so many more things. Amazon announced partnerships with a handful of companies, integrating with services users are likely familiar with. And then with all the different services under the Amazon umbrella, well, there's a lot of potential for Alexa Plus. As far as what devices are compatible, Alexa Plus will be able to be accessed by a variety of devices. Smartphones, tablets, speakers, web browsers, Fire TV, and more. Probably should mention that not all of the speakers out there will be compatible with Alexa Plus. Some of the older generation devices are not supported, but there are quite a few that are. We will be linking to more information in our episode notes, so be sure to check those articles out and see if your devices are supported. Number 3, back in December, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services announced a change to how special election period enrollments would work for individuals affected by either a government entity declared disaster or other emergency. beginning Tuesday, April 1st, quote, Medicare Advantage organizations and Part D sponsors will no longer accept elections directly from beneficiaries using the disaster/emergency SEP, end quote. Should an MA or PDP beneficiary want to make an enrollment change through the special disaster election period, they will have to call 1-800-MEDICARE in order to make that election. And when they say beginning April 1st, that applies to the date on the application. So if the date on the application is April 1st, 2025 or later, and your beneficiary wants to use that disaster SEP, they will have to call 1-800-MEDICARE in order to do so. CMS made this change in response to applications fraudulently using disaster SEPs to enroll clients who were not actually affected by a disaster or emergency. Plans are being instructed by CMS to mark applications incomplete if they come in with a date of April 1st, 2025 or later, and are marked as utilizing the disaster/emergency SEP. They've also begun removing the SEP from their enrollment forms. So if you've noticed that on recently updated forms, this is why. We will have a link to the memo from CMS, as well as a few other resources on this change in our episode notes. Number 2. On Monday this week, KFF published their takeaway on the key demographics to be affected by the expiration of ACA Marketplace Enhanced Tax Credits. Put in place by the Inflation Reduction Act, these enhanced tax credits allowed households bringing in an annual income of 400% of the federal poverty level or higher qualify for subsidies to lower the cost of their marketplace plans. Should the tax credits expire, which they are currently set to do at the end of 2025, the so-called subsidy cliff will return, and tax credits would only be available for those making under 400% of the federal poverty level. For those making 400% of the federal poverty level and higher, they would no longer be eligible for any help paying their premium, resulting in quite the rise in premium that they would be responsible to cover. Costs would rise across all income levels, but especially for those above the 400% FPL threshold. Getting into more specific demographics, within that income bracket of marketplace enrollees, 51% are between the ages of 50 and 64. 38% are self-employed, and 15% live in rural areas. Nationally, when we look at the income level above 400% FPL, 28% are between the ages of 50 and 64, 8% are self-employed, and 9% live in rural areas. Living in a rural area is a characteristic to keep in mind, but the national numbers and marketplace enrollee numbers don't differ enough to be considered statistically different. We're looking at a spread of just 6% there. However, there is a bigger difference to be found between those who are between the ages of 50 and 64 and those who are self-employed. There's a 23% jump in individual marketplace enrollees in the over 400% FPL target income level, 51% compared to 28% nationally. And then even greater, 38% of self-employed marketplace enrollees fall into the affected income level above 400% of the FPL, while just 8% land there nationally. Chances are good that for your clients who fall into those demographics, they're going to see their subsidies eliminated, their premiums rise, and it's possible that they might not be able to afford to make up the difference. The Urban Institute ran projections based on the difference in premiums between the original tax credits and the enhanced tax credits. Their estimate came in with those with an annual income of more than 400% of the federal poverty level would pay almost $3,000 more in annual premiums. Breaking that down monthly, that would be about $243 more in premium cost per month. Looking at the other income levels on the list, those with income in the 3 to 400% FPL bracket are projected to pay $516 more. The 250 to 300% FPL bracket estimate came in at $848 more. Projections for enrollees between 200 and 250% FPL increased by $573. In the 150 to 200% FPL bracket, premiums were estimated to increase by $725. And the lowest tier, under 150% of the federal poverty level, estimates show their cost going up $387. Now, while these numbers are definitely not great numbers to look at, just a reminder that they are projections. I think that's important to be mindful of. It is a bit sobering to see these numbers juxtaposed with enrollment data and how those numbers are projected to decrease alongside the rise in premium cost. But I think it's good to take a look at these projections now and start getting an idea of who in your book might be affected, so you can gauge how much your business will potentially be affected and start thinking sooner rather than later how you can offset that. And as always, we will keep you updated here as soon as we hear official word on what happens with the ACA enhanced tax credits. Moving on to our number one story this week. Last week, the Department of Health and Human Services announced through Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that they would no longer require a public comment period for proposed rules. A little bit of background here. The Administrative Procedure Act, or APA, was established to, quote, give interested persons an opportunity to participate in the rulemaking through the submission of written data, views, or arguments, and publish a final rule that is accompanied by a statement of the rule's basis and purpose, end quote. The APA also included an exemption for, quote, matters relating to agency management or personnel or to public property, loans, grants, benefits, or contracts, end quote. Should an agency deem that the comment process would be, quote, impracticable, unnecessary, or contrary to the public interest, end quote, they could exercise good cause and exempt themselves. A few years after the APA went into effect, the exemption policy was waived by a document called the Richardson Waiver. It put into practice the policy of a comment period and suggested that the good cause exemption be used sparingly. Essentially, HHS Secretary RFK Jr. is interpreting the Richardson Waiver to be contrary to the original Administration Procedure Act. Quote, the extra statutory obligations of the Richardson Waiver impose costs on the department and the public, are contrary to the efficient operation of the department, and impede flexibility to adapt quickly to legal and policy mandates, end quote. This stance echoes the Supreme Court's overturning of the Chevron deference, which allowed agencies to interpret statutes that were ambiguous. That rule was also found to be contrary to what was outlined in the Administrative Procedure Act. Now, at first glance, you might think, well, that doesn't sound great for healthcare, and I would agree because that's what I thought here at first as well. But the Administrative Procedure Act is not the only bit of legislation that requires a comment and review period for pending Medicare policy. According to statements from lawyers at Hogan Lovells, the rules governing Medicare are not enacted by the APA. They can actually be found in the Social Security Act. There's also an existing Supreme Court decision that upheld, quote, These Medicare rulemaking requirements apply independently from any rulemaking obligations imposed under the APA, end quote. Now, as far as Medicaid and CHIP go, well, that is a different story. The laws around their rulemaking regulations exist in a different part of the Social Security Act that, quote, does not contain an independent notice and comment rulemaking requirement, end quote. We will be keeping an eye on this particular piece of legislation. We are including a couple of different resources around this topic in the episode notes. Should there be more to report on, we will touch back on this, but I did want to provide the little bit of clarification that we currently can on that matter. We are still very much in a state of flux as far as regulations and potential policy go. But we do try our best to bring you information and resources and let you make the decision on how you feel about it. Call it the old school of journalism. And of course, if you have questions or you see a story that you'd like us to dive a little deeper into, we certainly don't mind geeking out over the Federal Register or phoning in those with more experience to help explain. You can send your questions for us to ASG Podcast. That's ASG, short for Agent Survival Guide, ASG Podcast at ritterim.com, and we will answer those questions for you here on the show. And another friendly reminder, if you're not following along with our show, now is a great time to visit the episode notes. Hit that plus button right before you check out all the resources we have to offer there, including more episodes like this one. But that is all we have for today. I hope you have a great weekend. Stay healthy and stay safe out there, and we will see you next week. The Agent Survival Guide podcast is a production of Ritter Insurance Marketing, an integrity company. This episode was written and produced by me, Sarah Ruppel. Script editing and fact check by Tina Lambrew. Podcast design by Urban Rivera. Artwork by Vivian Zhao. Follow along with us wherever you like to listen.